On this week's NESN Patriots Podcast, we will recap New England's Week 12 win over the Dallas Cowboys, and we will preview their upcoming matchup against the Texans in Houston. Hello and welcome to the NESN Patriots Podcast. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Zack Cox. Zack, how are you doing?
Doing well, Doug. Excited for Thanksgiving. This is my favorite holiday.
Favorite holiday?
It is my favorite holiday. I love the food. I love the football.
Mm-hmm.
It's in. I think what was Bill Belichick's word for it? He's like, food and football can't get any better than that.
Yeah, I think he said football, family, and football, and then corrected himself to football, family, and food.
All four of those things I'm down for. So I love Thanksgiving.
And a year or two ago, I think he said that football is a great holiday. That was another.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Bill Belichick rarely misspeaks, but I guess it's usually around Thanksgiving time that he makes these gaffes. But I greatly enjoy Thanksgiving as well. I think that Christmas is probably my favorite holiday, but I like that Thanksgiving. I first of all, I say Thanksgiving incorrectly. I think I say Thanksgiving instead of Thanksgiving.
You do put the emphasis on a
yes,
weird
on the wrong syllable.
Yeah.
But I like that it's kind of a kickoff to Christmas season, even though there's been Christmas movies played in my house for like the last month now.
Yeah, we have in my house. We already have full Christmas decorations against my my better judgment. I've held off on the tree. I said we can't get the tree until tomorrow, or no, not tomorrow, Friday. It's got to be after Thanksgiving to get the tree. But we've already got the lights and we've got the little decorations and the nutcrackers and all that. So yeah, we're a big Christmas household as well.
When I was growing up, we always waited until after Thanksgiving, but yeah, now it's all gone to hell in a handbasket. And I haven't put up lights yesterday because I had a lot of time to myself while Olivia was napping. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to throw the lights up outside. I don't think I did a very good job of it, but maybe I'll fix it on the Friday after Thanksgiving. But let's get into football. The Patriots are thankfully not playing on Thanksgiving. They are playing on Sunday against the Houston Texans. We will get into that game in a little bit, but let's first touch on the Patriots' win over the Dallas Cowboys. It won 13-9. Wasn't exactly the most exciting game. Pretty similar actually to that game that they won against the Eagles 2 weeks back now, where just wasn't a lot of points scored. Strong defensive performance, but not a whole lot going on offense. But I would say that, quality win over a team that was 6-4 and who had probably more talent on their roster than the record indicated.
Yeah, and I think for this one it was a little more understandable that there weren't a lot of points scored because this was some of the worst weather that I've seen for a Patriots game in quite some time. It was cold, it was windy, it was when you looked up at the stadium lights in Gillette Stadium and you just saw sheets of rain going sideways for basically the entire game. Yeah. It was some nasty conditions which kind of explained some of the offensive issues that both teams had, some of the drops that some Patriots receivers had. I definitely think the Patriots handled the conditions better than the Cowboys did, which kind of goes back into the point that I mentioned last week about this being a Bill Belichick versus Jason Garrett mismatch. Right. That was very evident on the field in this game. And yeah, it was, as you mentioned, it was a quality win over a team that's probably going to end up in the playoffs out of the NFC East.
Patriots offense scored 10 of their 13 points within like a 3 or 4 minute span between the end of the first quarter and the beginning of the second quarter. They scored another field goal early in the fourth quarter, but beyond that, no scoring for the Patriots offense. But I didn't come away from this game having the same level of concerns over the Patriots offense. I think it is because of the conditions, because of some of the drops that were caused by those conditions. But I thought that Sony Michel had one of his best games of the season, maybe the best. I don't know, my memory's short during the season, but he pulled off some decently long runs in this game with Isaiah Wynn back at left tackle. And I also thought that, Tom Brady had a decent performance, even though he completed less than 50% of his passes. And Jacoby Myers and N'Keal Harry had different performances, but they both flashed some upside in this game. Jacoby Myers, 4 catches on 9 targets for 74 yards. N'Keal Harry, just 1 catch on 4 targets, but it was a touchdown. So there's definitely something to work with there. And then also the Patriots were down their number 2 and 3 receivers, Mohamed Sanu and Philip Dorsett. So there was an excuse coming in for any troubles that they had on offense.
Yeah, I mean, given the conditions, given the what you just mentioned there, the fact that Sanu and Dorsett both did not play in this game, it was a little bit understandable that the Patriots offense didn't go out there and score 25, 30 points. And I'm in the same boat as you. I think this was actually a step in the right direction for the Patriots offense, which is weird because they only scored 13 points, only got 1 touchdown. But Stoney Michel, if this wasn't his best game, it was definitely one of his best 2 or 3. I think the Redskins game might have been slightly more productive, but just seeing the way that he ran in this game was very impressive. I definitely think having Isaiah Wynn back in the lineup helped in that regard. Isaiah Wynn actually didn't look great in pass protection early in the game. He kind of settled in later on. He had some issues against Robert Quinn rushing off that right edge early on in the game. He allowed a strip sack, allowed a couple of pressures. But in the running game, I think he definitely was a huge boost over what we saw from Marshall Newhouse in recent weeks. Really kind of got Stoney Michel in that ground game going a little bit. And then with the wide receivers, I still think it looks like Jacoby Myers, it's pretty clear that he's a more complete receiver than N'Keal Harry at this point in their respective careers. I think N'Keal Harry is definitely the more physically talented wide receiver. I think his ceiling is probably higher than Jacoby Myers, but just with all the things that the Patriots were doing with Jacoby Myers in this game, they were moving him all over the field. They had him lined up in the backfield on one play, doing a little kind of angle route that you usually see James White run. They had one play where they lined him up almost as a kind of wing tight end and had him chip the defensive end as he was going out. So they were giving him a lot of different responsibilities, and it wasn't a perfect game for him. He had one clear drop. Pro Football Focus charted him for a drop on that play where he got smoked by Jeff Heath down the seam. I don't really call that a drop. Maybe you say he should have held on to it, but that was a tough play.
The ball was kind of coming out of his hands before.
It was moving a little bit. He could have regathered. So I don't put that one too much on him. And then one of his biggest plays of the game, that 23-yarder, it was pretty clear that he was not in the place he was supposed to be because he was about 3 feet away from Julian Edelman on that play. But overall, this was a very promising performance from a guy that the Patriots needed to step up. I mean, I said it on our pregame show. Patriots didn't need N'Keal Harry and Jacoby Myers to win them this game, but they couldn't be liabilities out there. They couldn't be kind of negatives in this offense, and I don't think either one was. Again, both of them had kind of somewhat flawed performances, but I think you have to come away feeling pretty confident about both of them, especially Myers.
Yeah, the play that stuck out to me with Myers was the 32-yarder where, I mean, Jacoby Myers is 6'1". I think he's listed at 6'2", but
he's a skinny guy.
I accidentally I changed it, but I called him undersized in something that I was writing. I was like, well, he's 6'2", so he's not undersized, but he is a slender receiver. He's a slim receiver.
Yeah, seeing him next to N'Keal Harry is a very big disparity.
Yeah, they're like, he's 20, 30 pounds lighter than N'Keal Harry, but he broke a big tackle on the 32-yard catch and run, and then he also kind of dragged a defender an extra 5 or 6 yards, something like that, at the end of that play, which, quite honestly, is maybe more than we've seen Stoney Michel drag defenders this season.
Yeah, it was.
And for a slimmer receiver like Jacoby Myers, that was just a big effort play on his part.
Yeah, it was like the broken tackle trifecta on that play because he initially.
The
initial defender kind of wrapped him up. He sort of gave him a little mini stiff arm kind of shake, got down the field, had a really good juke to get away from one guy, and then, as you mentioned, dragged the third defender another 4 or 5 yards. So impressive play and not one that you expect from a guy of his stature and his kind of physique.
Julian Edelman and Jacoby Myers accounted for 87.9 of the Patriots' receiving yards in this game, which is extremely surprising. In our pregame chat that we do every week with Matt Chatham, I was basically saying that, okay, well, we know that Edelman, James White, Ben Watson, or Edelman, James White, and Rex Burkhead will, move the chains for the Patriots, but someone else has to step up.
I was thinking some Ben Watson in there, too.
Yeah, Ben Watson, too, but, I mean, Rex Burkhead had 2 catches on 5 targets for 14 yards. Ben Watson was without a catch on 1 target, and James White had 1 catch on 3 targets for -6 yards.
Crazy.
James White carried the ball twice for 5 yards. Burkhead carried the ball twice for 3 yards. So I don't know why those guys weren't a part of the game plan as far as carrying the ball or catching the ball out of the backfield. Maybe the Patriots just didn't really like the matchup with, someone like Jalen Smith or Jeff Heath or whoever was in the Cowboys defense. But it was extremely surprising to me that James White only caught one pass in a game where you assumed that James White was going to wind up with 10 catches or 10 targets or something like that. And the Patriots still were able to win this game. And a lot of that is on Jakobi Meyers for, he certainly, as you mentioned, was not perfect, caught less than 50% of his targets. But like I said, he and Edelman accounted for basically 88% of Tom Brady's passing yards.
Yeah, I think the White lack of production was probably the most surprising thing coming out of this game. Maybe it was a case where the Patriots assumed that the Cowboys, like everybody else, just expected this to be a big James White game,
right.
So they were going in a different direction with it. But this just goes back to the point I made earlier that the Patriots needed somebody else to step up in this game. And this was, 74 receiving yards from Myers. That was a career high. I think his previous career high was something like 50, 56 in that Jets game or one of those other games before. So, yeah, definitely moving in the right direction. And Tom Brady has been a lot more complimentary of these young receivers these last couple days than he was earlier in the year. Maybe I'm sure that's a combination of them actually kind of performing and him sort of wanting to distance himself from the constant narrative that he hates all of these young receivers. So, but it's definitely been significantly different to hear the way he's been talking about Jakobi Meyers and N'Keal Harry in these last couple days.
The biggest player on the Patriots defense was Stephon Gilmore, who blanked wide receiver Amari Cooper. Cooper was only targeted twice, did not catch a pass. He did catch one pass that was called back by penalty, and then he almost caught a pass near the end of the game that was reviewed and declared that the ball had hit the ground. But still, Stephon Gilmore blanked Amari Cooper, only allowed, I think, 2 other catches in the entire game.
Yeah,
had an
they were both kind of
interception.
short screen passes that weren't really they're in zone coverage anyway.
Yeah. But I think that Gilmore is now the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year this season over other guys like the Bosa brothers and Chandler Jones, and I forgot who else is really in that mix. But right now he's the favorite, and after a game like he had against the Cowboys with a national audience watching him, you can see why he's the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year at this point. He's taking on number 1 wide receivers every week, and I think he's only allowed a 37 passer rating on the season, which is second best in the NFL to his teammate J.C. Jackson. But obviously Jackson isn't taking on number 1 wide receivers like Gilmore is, so that stat is even more impressive for someone like Gilmore.
Yeah, it's been pretty remarkable. I don't know if I would say Stephon Gilmore is playing significantly better this year than he did last year, because he was very, very good last year. It might just be sort of a case of where this continues to build. There is kind of a continued recognition now that he is the best cornerback in the NFL. I feel like he's kind of distancing himself from someone like Jalen Ramsey in that conversation. And it first came out a couple weeks ago, last week or 2 weeks ago, where Bovada released odds for Defensive Player of the Year, and Gilmore was number 1 on that list, and I was a little surprised, and I even wrote in my story that I wrote up on those odds that it still seems like kind of unlikely that he will win, just because this award tends to favor front 7 players so much.
True.
I mean, there hasn't been a cornerback that's won, or there hasn't been a defensive back that's won Defensive Player of the Year since 2010. That was Troy Polamalu. And Charles Woods in 2009 is the only cornerback to win it since Deion Sanders in 1994. So this is a very kind of pass rusher, linebacker focused award typically. But with the way that Stephon Gilmore has been playing and continues to play, especially as you mentioned on stages like the one we saw this past weekend, that was, I think it was the most watched NFL game in like 20 years or something like that, or regular
Since
season game.
2007, I think.
It was a gigantic audience, as you would expect for Patriots versus Cowboys, and then he's going to have another chance for a similarly difficult battle against DeAndre Hopkins coming up this weekend. If he continues this through the end of the year, and where I noticed that the Bosas and some other players are playing well around the league, but I feel like maybe it's just that the word hasn't really reached us up in New England that much, but I don't feel like there's another totally dominant defensive player in the league this year, at least from what I've heard. I don't know. I think now that he has a much better chance of taking home this award than I than kind of first crossed my mind when I first heard about these odds.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that one thing that's really helping him this season as compared to last year, maybe even the year before, is the interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
He's got 4 interceptions on the season. He also has the pick 6, which was the first of his NFL career. So I think that that's really what you need as a cornerback, is to have those interceptions or to have those kind of counting numbers. And he's been very good at getting his hand on the football this season. He's got 13 pass breakups. He had 20 last season, so pretty much on pace with what he had last year. But he is converting more of those into interceptions this season. And it's on plays when he's targeted, plays when he's not targeted. And like I mentioned, I think that pick 6 probably has something to do with it as well. But yeah, there's not really outside of Gilmore. I think Aaron Donald is in the mix as well this season.
He always is, but the Rams are just kind of such a mess this year that I feel like that just the stink surrounding their team is kind of hurting his candidacy.
I think that another thing that's helping Gilmore is just his teammates around him. The fact that, the Patriots have such a good defense, and he's the best player on the best defense in the NFL.
Yeah.
I think that helps him as well. TJ Watt, I think, was also on the list as far as guys who are up for that award. He's, playing. It's kind of amazing. When was TJ Watt drafted? Was he a first-round pick?
He was 30th, I think. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing that, after what happened with J.J. Watt, where he was, he was still a top 15 pick, but he was kind of a little bit unheralded compared to what he turned into coming out of college, that the same exact thing happened with TJ Watt. And now TJ Watt, he's not his brother, but he's a fantastic player in that Steelers defense. It's kind of amazing that he fell all the way to 30, given the way that his brother ascended in the NFL as well.
Yeah, I mean, back to those Gilmore statistics that you mentioned earlier. 13 passes defended. That's second in the league behind old buddy Logan Ryan. He has 16 down in Tennessee. And interceptions are tied for third with 4. Devin McCourty's actually tied for first with 5 still. He and Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think
Minka's on that list as well.
Minkah is having a phenomenal season.
Yeah.
I still think that was somewhat of an ill-advised trade by the Steelers, but if you're going to get a player like that for the next couple of years, he's been unreal.
It was ill-advised at the time just because it seemed like the Steelers were going to be really terrible this season.
Yeah.
But he and that defense have really kind of turned that team around. And now, Minka's in his 2nd season, right?
I believe so, yeah.
So, yeah, you give up a pick around the 20s, I guess, for Minkah Fitzpatrick for 4 years. I think that, that trade actually wound up turning out pretty decently for the Steelers, because you probably won't get a player of that caliber where they are drafting next season. But, other than Gilmore, weird game because there wasn't a ton of pass rush from the Patriots. They didn't have any sacks. No one really stood out that huge as a pass rusher. But, just obviously another very solid all-around performance against an offense that was looking like a juggernaut coming into last week against the Patriots.
Yeah, I liked what I saw from the Patriots linebackers in this game. Jamie Collins was everywhere early in this game. Dante Hightower has also made a lot of good plays, especially early on in that first quarter. I feel like, I don't know if it's a conscious thing on their part, but I do feel like the Patriots linebackers have been playing very well since that Baltimore game, where they had a couple of shaky plays, especially Collins, because he was kind of isolated on that option spot with Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram on a couple plays. But over the last 2 games, I feel like that unit has played tremendously well, basically like it has for much of the season.
Yeah, let's get into this week's game against the Houston Texans. Another really tough matchup. Patriots are favored by something like 3 or 3.5, I think, over the Texans, which, I don't know, I guess that's a slight surprise to me since this game is in Houston. Obviously, the Patriots are the better team, but that basically says that Vegas would have the Patriots as, 6 or 6.5 point favorites if this was on a neutral field, which, I guess that's fair, but
I think it would probably be, I think it would probably be similar. I still think the Patriots have a clear edge in this game, just because of the history between those two teams, and the fact that I think if the Texans didn't have that huge stinker against the Ravens a couple weeks ago, maybe it would be the sort of narrative coming into this game would be a little bit different.
That's fair,
the Patriots also obviously did not beat the Baltimore Ravens, but they made a game of it at least. The Texans lost 41-7 to them a couple weeks ago, which was a very surprising result at the time, and even though they came back and beat the Colts this past week, I still, it's still hard to kind of view them as a super bona fide kind of AFC Championship contender at the moment, just seeing how they played against Baltimore.
Yeah, they did beat the Colts last week, but it was not the most decisive of victories. What was it, 2017, something like that in that game.
Thursday night game.
But this is another, we're talking about talented teams, another very talented team. Deshaun Watson is a great quarterback, obviously. DeAndre Hopkins, possibly the best wide receiver in the NFL. It's probably either him, Michael Thomas, someone in that mix. They've got, a decent defense. Bill Belichick was really talking up Zach Cunningham and Benardrick McKinney today. They don't have J.J. Watt. They don't have Jadeveon Clowney, who's now playing in the Seattle Seahawks. So, not as big of a name defense as the Patriots have played in the past against the Texans. But this is obviously going to be a significant challenge for the Patriots. And it's another game just to stack up to see where the Patriots defense ranks, where the Patriots offense ranks against another, very talented team.
I think the interesting thing about this game is just how different this Texans team is than the ones we've seen in recent years, because the Texans are basically a pseudo-divisional opponent for the Patriots at this point. They play basically every single year. They played in 2015, 2016, twice in 2017 because they played in the playoffs. Once in the season opener last year. But since that game, Bill Belichick was talking about this morning in his news conference, they've made a lot of significant changes. I mean, obviously some of the big pillars are still there. There's still Watson, there's still Hopkins, Bill O'Brien and Romeo Crennel are still there on the coaching staff. But a lot of these pieces have changed. You mentioned Clowney, you mentioned J.J. Watt. They've got two new running backs, Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson.
Lamar Miller out for the season, right? That was an injury situation.
Lamar Miller, he's no longer available. Alfred Blue gone. That was kind of the duo that they were rolling with for the last couple of years. Their secondary is almost completely different. They've got Jonathan Joseph still. They have Justin Reed, but now they brought in a parade of these defensive backs. Bradley Roby, Garyon Conley, Lonnie Johnson, the rookie, Vernon Hargraves just came there a couple weeks ago. Tayshaun Gibson, Jaleel Adai. They've got old buddy Keon Cross in there. He doesn't play much on defense, but and then Kenny Stills as well over from the Miami Dolphins, the wide receiver. So and their offensive line is better too than it was in the past. Their offensive line was probably the worst in the entire NFL last year. They brought in Laramie Tunsil. They've got two new rookies starting on that offensive line, and Max Sharping and Titus Howard. They're still not great. I mean, Deshaun Watson's still been sacked more than any player or any quarterback in the NFL this season, but if you look at the advanced metrics in their Pro Football Focus, their pass blocking efficiency, they were 31st in the league last year. They're up to 11th in the league this year, so definitely protecting Deshaun Watson a lot better than they were in the past, and that was really their primary weakness last season, is that they just couldn't keep defenders away from their star quarterback.
Yeah, it is an interesting team the way that it has been changed, because it's like it appears to still be the same. You've still got Watson, you've still got DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, some of the guys on the defensive line, or at least some of the guys at linebacker, like McKinney and Cunningham and Merciless, and then like you mentioned, still have Justin Reed, still have Jonathan Joseph. But like those are sort of the big names that you remember, but then almost everyone else around them has sort of been changed. So yeah, it is a different team than they've seen in the past here, but
it makes it a little more fun for us too.
Oh
honestly,
my God, yeah, I was sick of tired.
I mean, this is kind of inside baseball stuff, but we are extremely tired of covering Patriots, Texans events of any sort, because they also had, I mean, even with on top of all those 5 matchups they've had in the last 4 years. 5 matchups they had in the last 6 years. They also had the joint practices together 2 summers ago, and you can only go so long with the kind of Patriots connection storyline and the Deshaun Watson storyline and the DeAndre Hopkins. It's nice to see some new faces in there that kind of mix things up a little bit.
For sure. And the Texans also did try to steal away Nick Caserio as their GM this offseason. That did not go well. The Patriots filed tampering charges. The Texans dropped their pursuit of Caserio, but Caserio will essentially be a free agent after the season's contract is up with the Patriots. So the Texans could kind of pick up that pursuit of Nick Caserio, and it'll be interesting to see what does happen with that. Bill Belichick in his news conference this morning, somewhat surprisingly, did say that Jack Easterby had nothing to do with those tampering charges. So, a lot of people kind of assumed that Easterby had talk to Caserio at the Patriots Super Bowl 53 ring ceremony in June because the Texans fired their general manager, Brian Gaine, literally the next day. But Belichick said that Easterby had nothing to do with the tampering charges. So at least on the surface, Belichick is saying that those tampering charges were pursuing someone who was under contract already doing the job that he was being hired away to do, rather than some other nefarious dealings by the Texans. So I did think it was kind of interesting that Belichick did specify that this morning, that had nothing to do with Easterby.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting kind of little nugget in there. He also said, what did he say? It's basically water under the bridge, and they're not worrying about it at the moment. But I'm sure this will become a prominent storyline moving forward toward the offseason if the Patriots and Nick Caserio don't come to some sort of long-term deal before then.
This week, do you think this is a bigger test, I guess, for the Patriots offense or for the Patriots defense? Obviously, we all sort of know what the Patriots defense is a lot better than the Patriots offense, but at the same time, they are going up against bigger weapons like Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins and all these guys, and they did struggle against a rushing quarterback a couple weeks ago with Lamar Jackson. So this is still a test for the defense, but the offense is so unproven right now that do you think this is – what are you going to be watching a little bit more closely in this game?
Probably the defense, I think, just because I think it's a bigger eye-opener if a team can move the ball and score points on this defense, just because nobody's really been able to do it except for the Baltimore Ravens this season. I think that the offense – the Texans' offense, I don't think is as explosive as the Ravens' offense. I think it's much more traditional, even though they do have that rushing element with Deshaun Watson, which is something that has given the Patriots issues in the past. But I think this is still one of the better offenses the Patriots have played this season, just with the caliber of players, especially with a guy like DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson. And Carlos Hyde's also having a very good season. I believe he's seventh in the NFL in rushing yards so far. Kenny Stills is always a guy who puts up numbers too, and Will Fuller, when he's healthy, he's one of the kind of premier big play deep threats in the NFL. So I'm always interested to see how the Patriots defense continues to stack up against offenses that are of basically even anything higher than sort of league average caliber. And that'll be this week against the Texans, and then next week against the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be the last two real tests they have during the regular season. So if they can pass through these two, continuing to put up the same numbers they have, it really bodes well for them going forward toward the postseason.
That Ravens game must have just decimated the Texans offense from a DVOA perspective, because they're ranked 15th in offensive DVOA on Football Outsiders, which really surprises me, especially since they've had some really high-powered games. They scored 53 on the Falcons, 31 on the Chiefs, 27 on the Raiders, 26 on the Jaguars, but their defensive DVOA is 26th. So it will also be notable if the Patriots offense continues to struggle to move the ball, because this is not, quite frankly, a very good defense that they're going up against this week. So this could be a nice bounce-back performance. At the same time, it is on the road. It is obviously harder to play on the road. So I personally wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots lost this game, but in that battle for the number one seed in the AFC, Patriots should definitely be, trying to win out. At the same time, the Ravens are playing the 49ers this week. That's
going to be an awesome game.
Is that a day game?
It's a day game. It's a 1 p.m.
Oh,
game.
yeah, it's a 1 p.m.
1 p.m. In Baltimore.
So obviously it would help the Patriots quite a bit if the 49ers were able to beat the Ravens in that game, because then they would have another one-game cushion to lose before the season is out, because the Patriots certainly do not want to have to go into Baltimore during the playoffs. But they'll sort of know the fate of that game before that Sunday night game that they play between the 49ers and the Ravens, and clearly the Patriots will be rooting for old buddy Jimmy Garoppolo in that game.
Absolutely, because the Ravens would have that tiebreaker if they finish with the same record. Ravens still do have some potentially losable games down the stretch. They have to go to Buffalo. They play the Steelers. They have to go to the Browns. Browns have been schizophrenic this season, but do have talent. And then they have the Jets, who actually have been playing strangely well lately. So this isn't a cakewalk for the Ravens the rest of the way. I think it's almost maybe the Patriots' schedule is a little bit tougher because they do have the Chiefs in there, but they're going to destroy the Bengals. They're going to destroy the Jets. And the Bills at home never really come close against the Patriots when they're here.
I think you meant the Dolphins, not the Jets.
Yes, the Dolphins. Yes. Even then my point stands even more for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, after next week, the Patriots schedule really opens up and frees up. Obviously, Texans and Chiefs are still big challenges, but like you said, Bengals, Bills, and Dolphins. None of those games should be a huge challenge. Let's get into America's favorite game right now, where we guess where a player that we've never heard of went to college. I am going to pick. Do you know where Brennan Scarlett went to school? Outside linebacker, number 57.
It strikes me as a USC for some reason.
Ooh, Brennan Scarlett. Yeah. I'll stick in the same conference and say Arizona State. Where did Brennan Scarlett go to school? Cal and Stanford. We danced all around that one without actually nailing it down. Wow, we had 2 shots at that one. Do you know where Peter Kalambayi went?
I don't. Do you?
I think he went to Stanford. He did.
Oh, he did. Do you know where Kiki Kuti went?
He went to Texas Tech.
He did go to Texas Tech. And, I mean, we should mention that Cornell Armstrong, the America's favorite game all-star, is on this team. The former Miami Dolphin from Southern Miss, who gave me my only victory to date in this game.
Yeah, and the only legit one. How old is Mike Adams at this point?
Quite old.
38?
38.
He's 38?
I remember he was old because he was on the Panthers, I believe, when they played here 2 years ago. Is that correct? And I remember saying, I can't believe Mike Adams is still in the league, and he's still kicking.
I didn't know he made 2 Pro Bowls.
What, back in like the late 90s?
In 2014 and 2015, semi-recently.
Good for him. Good
for
you, Mike Adams.
Mike Adams. We might see a Mike Adams against Ben Watson matchup this weekend, where you've got 2 38-year-olds going up against each other. Unless Ben Watson turns 39 before this game. When does Ben Watson turn 39? Let's look this up real quick. December 9th. No, that's not the Ben Watson I'm looking for.
That is the wrong football.
That is the wrong football. Benjamin Watson, December 18th. So, yeah, we'll be 30. I'm rooting for a Mike Adams versus Benjamin Watson matchup, one-on-one in coverage, because I want to see 2 38-year-olds go at it. That will do it for the NESN Patriots Podcast. You can keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow Zach on Twitter at Zack Cox NESN. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed.